Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Linn-Mar Community School District. I want to welcome any guests and visitors and everybody this evening. Can you determine a quorum, please?
Director Foss.
Here.
Director Lau Lancaster.
Here.
Director Maury.
Here.
Director Rollinger.
Here.
Director Walker.
Here.
Director Wall.
Here.
President Buchholz.
Here. We need to adopt the agenda as presented.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Britt, second by Melissa to adopt the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we're going to have a public hearing. We need to refer to Exhibit 601.1, 602.1. A public hearing will be held regarding the plans and specifications for Linn-Mar High School Indian Creek Elementary Roof Replacement Project and the new Linn-Mar Performing Arts Center. Do we have anybody that wants to comment on that in the audience today? If none, the public hearing is closed. Okay, at this time we have audience communication. The board will receive and acknowledge comments but will not engage in a dialogue with the speaker because of the set agenda for the meeting. Looks like we have one person, Amanda Snyder.
Hello, my name is Amanda Snyder. I have two kids in the district. At a board meeting in December of 22, it was mentioned that Tetra Tech, I believe it is, did a security tour, or I'm sorry, a safety tour of all of our buildings, and they had provided feedback. From December to August, we heard nothing about this, so I had reached out to Amy in August asking what was going on with that. She told me that there was a team, that they were going through it, they were ahead of schedule for the December deadline. We still haven't heard anything. She has also said that there is a grant for money for each building to increase safety. I would like to know what we're doing. A year is a long time to go through feedback on a safety tour. So I would like to get some feedback. I've reached out again to Amy. I've not heard anything, so I will send an email to the whole board following up from this because I would like to know what's going on with that. And I hope that we are going to increase SRO officers at each building because that is really needed. One officer for this whole district is not enough. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only one that we have at this point, so we'll move forward. We're going to the informational meetings. We're going to have a teacher and learning report, Exhibit 501.1, from Erica Rausch, Director of Intermediate Middle School Teaching and Learning, which is 5th through 8th grade, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So, good evening. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share with you this evening the work that is happening at the middle level. And I am Erica Rausch, Middle Level Director, which oversees 5th through 8th grade. So thank you, Barry. We'll begin by just looking at the intermediate buildings. So there are 2 intermediate buildings, and within those buildings houses 5th and 6th grade. I've listed there for you the elementary buildings that feed into those intermediate buildings. And then within those configurations, there are 2 teachers that share students. And so one of those teachers is in charge of both the math and science, and then the other teacher teaches literacy and social studies. 5th grade right now is the largest class in the district with approximately 650 students, with our other classes right now at approximately 550 students. Moving forward then to the middle school, so there's 2 middle school buildings as well. Within those buildings are the 7th and 8th grade students. And you can see there then the intermediate buildings in which middle school building they feed into. And students there are placed on interdisciplinary teams. And so therefore they have a separate teacher for each of the content areas in which they receive instruction. When we think about what do we want students to experience through exposure, and we think about kind of what choices do students have, really the only choice they have is to take band, vocal, or orchestra, really 5th through 8th grade. So that's really the only choice they have. All other courses are a must-take, and the idea then is to give students opportunities to try new things and to see if there's interest then in those opportunities, thinking about future courses in high school or thinking about possible career choices as well. I did miss Family Consumer Science is also an 8th grade course offering as well, and I missed that. And so I just want to note that that should be there as well. Professional learning communities, we've talked about that. The Iowa core standards define what it is that all students should know and be able to do, and that's really that PLC question number 1. What is it that we want all students to know and be able to do? And the core standards help to define that. And so we are a professional learning communities district, which means we are a community of professionals who use the practices of the 4 questions to guide our teaching and collaboration. I'll review those 4 questions with you through my presentation when we kind of walk through math curriculum. The other piece is the high reliability schools, and so HRS level 3 talks about guaranteed and viable curriculum. Guaranteed means that all teachers are aware of the content they are responsible for teaching, and in fact then they teach that content. This ensures that all students have the opportunity to learn the grade and subject content. Then there has been an intentional planning and decision making around the K-8 alignment of the 4 content areas, and so that's that guaranteed piece, and Carla, the elementary director, and I have worked close to make sure those align. Viable in that guaranteed and viable means that the amount of content is teachable in the time available for instruction. And so when we think about that, we think about that pacing and that prioritization of the Iowa Common Core standards. And so thinking about all the standards that we have to teach, how do we make sure that they're viable and that we've paced that out and prioritized that instruction as well. So if we start to move in then to the 4 content areas, science, the science units that we teach are provided through Grantwood AEA, and they are the FOSS materials that support the Iowa Science Standards. All grades have units that include earth, physical, and life science, so 5th through 8th that is included. And then if we move on to social studies in Iowa are designed around grade level themes, and so I've listed those 4 grade level themes there for you on this slide. The standards are based in inquiry, so when the standards were released, there were not really materials to support the standards at all the grade levels, and so the state worked closely with our area education agencies to provide training, lots of training as to how to look at the standards, how to bundle those standards, and how to put units together. And the state has provided lots of resources to help in that work and support it. So what I've provided here is just a snippet of an example of a 6th grade unit that we have put together. So I work with teachers to develop those inquiry units, and then we're continually evaluating the units, revising, replacing them as necessary. And so again, that's work along with the AEA, work that we've done alongside the state, and then teacher-developed work that we've done together. Then if we look at literacy materials, the materials we use to support the instruction of the Iowa core standards in literacy, you can see are kind of varied. When I mentioned that K-8 alignment earlier in the presentation, this is kind of the example that I was referring to. So we use Wit and Wisdom as our literacy materials for 5th and 6th grade. Those are the same materials that are used in 3rd and 4th grade, and so again, that was intentional to create that we were a same as much as we could across grade levels to kind of have the least number of transition as possible for students. EL education, that's the materials used for 7th and 8th grade. The design of those materials are very similar to Wit and Wisdom, which again was important in thinking about that experience for students. Both of those materials are aligned to, again, the Iowa core standards, and so the the alignment to the standards are what then guarantees kind of the assurance of that guaranteed curriculum. So that is how we know that they're connected and that we're giving kids the instruction that they need. Language Live that I have listed here, that's the reading intervention. So that's used for students 5th through 8th grade. And again, thinking about that alignment was important to think about how to best support our students who continue to need some support with reading as they move through the grade levels. So when students move from elementary to intermediate, it is important that we think about them as that whole child and as that student. And they like to do new things that make them feel more growing up. So having a new program to address their reading is one way we can help them feel like they've made that shift and a transition to intermediate. This then will be consistent 5-8, so that's the intervention that we'll use. Again, it's aligned to standards, it's aligned to letters training, which is now the state-supported letters, and the reading research for the state of Iowa. So that aligns nicely to that. Literacy. So kind of in talking about this presentation, when Carla presents the elementary curriculum review, she's in 2 weeks, she's going to spend time going deeper into literacy, and she'll connect with you on how we did our research and what we used to select our new literacy materials as we looked at that 3-6. But I want you to know, again, the research was put to action. HRS is still something that is supported through literacy, and we use those PLC questions to answer our instruction. What I would like to do then is do the deeper dive into math. So she won't spend a lot of time in math. She'll spend that time in literacy, just to kind of, we didn't want you to hear the same things twice. So if I take you into that deep dive into math, we used research to support the decision of our math materials. And so on this slide here, you can see resources, research, resources, and then the unwrapping of resources. And that comes right off of the Department of Ed math webpage. And one of the things they have highlighted there is the shifts in mathematics. And the shifts point out kind of the focus where the standards, to focus where the standards focus. And so, again, so we've spent a lot of time thinking about the major work of each grade level and what standards should appear in which grade level. The other thing that we've spent a lot of time looking at is the coherence. And so you can see there on that slide too, the coherence map shows the connections between Common Core state standards for mathematics. So thinking about how those standards work across grade levels, and then how are those major topics like linked within a grade. And if you start to kind of think about the math standards as a story, like what is that standard telling you? What's the story of the standard, and how does that story grow as you move across the grade levels? And then the last big shift then is in the rigor of the standard. Students need to have conceptual understanding, they need to have the procedural skill and the fluency or application of that standard. And so again, being really thoughtful about that. So some of the resources that were used then, I have noted here. One of them is the Principles to Actions book, and that's the blue box that you see. That actually comes from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And that book has been distributed now electronically to all the educators in Iowa. So again, that is supported through Iowa. Much of the work around the math standards follows the work then in that book, Principles to Actions. And so we use that a lot with our principals and with our coaches and our math leaders. In the middle there is the Building Thinking Classrooms book, the orange book. So that book shares 14 different practices that research has supported, that if we use those practices within our math classroom, then we will kind of be able to transfer the thinking from teachers to students. So the idea behind that is, how do we have students doing more of that thinking in mathematics versus teachers kind of doing all the thinking and the explaining and the demonstrating? So how do we make those shifts? So we did have the opportunity to attend Peter's workshop, who is the author of that book, back in November. So he was at Grantwood AEA. He was there for 2 days. He had an elementary day, and then he had a secondary day. Many of our principals, as well as our coaches and our math leaders, were able to attend, and teachers came back very excited about how to implement these practices into their classrooms moving forward. Again, it's not something you're going to come in and do all 14 tomorrow, but there's ways to kind of increasingly add those practices. And so that is professional development that we continue to provide to principals, coaches, and then math leaders as well. A couple other resources that are noted here. One is the visible learning. And so, again, that's based on work of John Hattie. And so John Hattie has done lots of work with meta-analysis and looking at research on the effect size. So there's many practices that we do within schools. And so he's done a lot of research and meta-analysis to decide like which of those practices really are most important. So he does have that in that visible learning book as well, just for mathematics. And that supports then everything that we've seen in those other areas as well. And then just to kind of go back again, Carla and I have been working really hard with K-8 with principals and coaches to provide continual professional learning around mathematics this year. And I think it's been well received with those groups as we've met with them. So kind of thinking about all that information, we have the program that we chose then to implement was illustrative mathematics, so that's here for you, and that is the same K-8, so it's one program. It has a coherent progression of which supports students making connections to prior understandings and then upcoming grade level work. So it really is written aligned to our standards, and then really that coherence map is within the materials as well. The progression of math aligns to the research-based learning trajectories and is a problem-based curriculum. Students learn by doing math, so they have problem solving, they spend time with their conceptual understanding, they discuss math, they defend math. A typical lesson will have the warm-up, usually 2 to 3 instructional activities that students will perform, and then a lesson synthesis, so it gives the teacher an opportunity to kind of bring that learning back together, and then a cool down, which is a way to kind of see where students end at the end of that lesson. So if we go back now and we start thinking about what are those professional learning community questions, that question 1 then, what is it that we want all students to be able to know and to do? So we have focus documents for each grade level. So this is just an example of 5th grade. This comes from Achieve the Core, and it's using the Common Core State Standards, which align then to the Iowa Core Standards. And it helps to identify for us where is the major work of the grade level and where should we spend the majority of our time. So about 85% of our time should really be in the major work of the grade level, and those are then those green standards that are outlined there. So that helps us to have better definition of what is it that we want students to know and to do. If we move on then to that second question, how do we know if students have learned? When we are wanting to know if students have learned, we're looking for evidence. So a lot of times we talk to teachers about what is the evidence that you're seeing. And so the mentioned items on this slide are ways teachers can see evidence of learning within the math resources. So within the illustrative lessons and within those materials, those are evidence pieces that teachers can monitor to see if students are learning. So then you come to that third question, how do we respond when students don't learn? And so what I have here again is just a snippet. It comes from 5th grade, and so this is 5th grade kind of at a glance. So here's each of the units within illustrative. And again, you can see when we talked about those focus standards, you can see the major focus standards there are in green and where they appear throughout the year within 5th grade. And so one of the things that we have tried to kind of focus our attention on is how can we identify where students need support prior to. So we have some readiness assessments that we have laid out that align to those major work standards, so those green ones. And so if we are able to assess students prior to actually going into that work within that standard, then we can do some previewing with students with the hope that students don't need intervention on that backside. So if here's where we're at with the grade level, we do the readiness assessment, we see kids aren't quite ready to enter in where everyone else is. If we do that preview work with them prior to, hopefully they're closer to the same floor that everyone else is, so then when that instruction happens, they're ready to move forward. Otherwise, if you think about it, if they're here, their other classmates are here, we go through the unit, we've given instruction, and they're not, then you're going back on the back end and trying to fix that. It's better to, what can we preload and give them ahead of time? So that's kind of been our focus this year, and really being kind of thoughtful about where those standards appear, how we're going to approach them, and how we can support that. So then again, here's just another picture of kind of that multi-tiered systems of support. So when we talk about illustrative math, that's that tier 1, that's that core everyone receives. And then we need to then, when we think about focusing on interventions, it's really then thinking about what is that major work, because that's where we want to spend time, and then how do we continuously align our intervention materials to the core and those standards. And if you think about that tier 2, that's some supplemental, so a little bit of increased time and a little more increased focus on those pieces, and then a tier 3 intervention might be a little more increased time and a little more focus. And we've been pretty intentional right now about trying to be specific on kind of where are we going to intervene, what's going to give the kids the biggest impact for future needs. And so what we've really landed on is fraction sense, hands-on equations, hands-on fractions, and then bridges is an intervention that is new that Carla and I are working on. It really only goes up to 5th grade, but there probably will be some benefits in being able to use that beyond 5th grade, 6th grade, maybe even 7th, but it really focuses in on more of the domains of math versus just the standards. And then AEA resources. So I will say the AEA has been super, super helpful in implementing all of this work and supportive. And then finally, that last question, how do we respond when students already know? And so current research really, the key to math success is that flexibility and our kids being able to be flexible in their thinking. And again, if we think about what we've been trying to talk to, what I've been working with teachers is, again, having opportunities ready for students. So how can we, if we're thinking about students being flexible in that thinking, how can we ask them to use maybe different numbers in the problem? How can we ask them to decompose the problem? Maybe find the best wrong answer for the problem. Can they solve it in another way? Just having other ways for them to be flexible in approaching of the mathematics is another way when students are already ready or already know maybe some of the things that we're doing or are able to do some of those activities within the lesson. There's another thing I was going to say with that? No, I can't remember. Okay. So then finally, that support and monitoring of that guaranteed and viable curriculum. So there's several snippets here, and I'll kind of just talk through each one a little bit briefly. You can see there the wipe book paper. So that was one of the pieces in that targeted support for principals and coaches. We spent time trying to model some of the building thinking classrooms, and part of that is having non-permanent vertical spaces in which kids are able to do mathematics. And so we've modeled that, and that's just some of that support we've done with principals and coaches. The other thing is I have on there just a picture of a calendar, kind of dates. Those are times that I spend meeting with curriculum facilitators in my office, so I spend a lot of time trying to get teacher voice around the table and collaboration so that teachers are able to go back within those PLC meetings and have the conversations. There's some content PD that we're able to provide during that time as well. And then use of the aligned materials. Again, there's in our illustrative materials, there's just a snippet there of 7th grade where by lesson they're aligned to standards. So again, very tightly aligned on a daily basis of what we can do. Common scoring guides for assessments. So one of the things we've worked really hard on in math, and then we're also working on in literacy, is just common scoring guides. So when we get to those end of unit assessments, there's some, again, that guarantee that I know the things that I'm assessing and I'm looking for within my student assessment is the same thing the teacher next door, the teacher in the other building is also looking for. So that work is being done. We have the piecing guides that we've set out so that, again, guaranteed, viable, that's really that viable piece. And then the common place for all teachers to be able to access materials. So we have all things middle level on Schoology. So any of the units that are common for all teachers, the scoring guides, the pieces that all teachers are expected to kind of use are all right there for them to find. And then ongoing pieces of collection of data. So right there is just the readiness assessments. Again, it's a piece of data that we can collect to see, again, health of our system and are kids coming ready to approach that next grade level work, and if not, why not? If so, why? Again, it's just a way for us to monitor what's happening. And again, the end result is we want all of our arrows hopefully going in the same direction for teachers and for students, which hopefully then leads to high student achievement in the end. And so at this time, thank you for allowing me to share. Like, there is so hard to narrow down what to bring and share because there's so much that I would love to share. But that's just kind of a overview, a high overview of our curriculum. And at this time, I would entertain any of your questions.
So I was looking over this on the weekend. I did have just two questions for you, and it's on content that's in the deck here. On slide 15, in one of them, in the middle rows, you've got readiness assessment, and you have as one of the actions, could give Howard County 6th grade readiness assessment. And I was curious if that was a typo or if that's a standardized.
So Howard County's materials, and that was kind of the assessments that some of our elementary teachers were more used to giving. And so that is an option because some of our teachers are more familiar with that. The other piece, the readiness assessments that you see listed in there, that's the work that was done kind of in tandem with AEA to create then. So those assessments, the other ones that are in there are taken problems from illustrative and those prior grade levels to line them more to that major work. So
Howard County's a brand.
yes.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a long way to your answer.
Nope,
Yeah.
totally understand. And I get to ask the question.
Yep.
On slide 18,
Sure.
you were talking about just the uniform weighting and grading and whatnot. And I'm assuming that if somebody saw this potentially out of context, potentially as I am, they might ask the same question. So I just wanted to understand. You had, for the first question, if there are 15 pieces of fruit in a bowl and 6 of them are apples, what percentage of the pieces of fruit in the bowl are apples? And you put here, so as a way to have a standard response, you've got response value. If the right answer is selected, you get 2 points. But if the wrong answer is selected, you get 1 point. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't you get 0 points? And I'm assuming it's not that easy, but again, I just wanted to ask.
So I would like, we could talk about this. So yes, so what, that is the scoring guides that we've created. And all of and for those reasons, because initially when we started the materials, my initial fear was teachers would take these assessments and yes, like somebody would look and say, oh, it's either right or wrong, it's all correct or it's 0. Some would be like, oh, you have the teachers that, oh, that's a half point because it's or there's just all the different ways of scoring. And so one of the things, the work that we spent a lot of time last year is really sitting down, and teachers actually took those end of year assessments. We did them in my office, everyone took them, and then we sat down and we talked about it. And what is different about the math right now is really, it's trying to get to the thinking, like how are kids thinking about mathematics? And so the reason you can have a wrong answer and still get some value of credit for that is because of the thinking that's aligned to getting to that answer. So sometimes in math you can have a totally wrong answer, but you could have had all the right thinking and made some kind of error. And so it's just trying to add some value and having teachers have some understanding of the thinking of the mathematics behind it. And so thank you for seeing that and asking that question. It's been a huge, I think, switch in just teacher thinking about how we're evaluating students, and it's not all right, it's not all wrong. Where are they in kind of that trajectory to be able to get where we want them to be in that flexible thinking mathematically? So, sorry.
It's the context that pays. That's a wonderful answer, because as I sit with my 7th grade son through the math, and he'll have worked through some of his problems and answered the entire problem and shown his work for all of it and come to a wrong answer. And in my growing up, I would have thought myself, well, that's worthless, you're 0. But in reality, he used the principles, but maybe he got caught up someplace. And we're trying to teach them to think, not necessarily just compute. So I appreciate that.
Good questions, thanks.
I have one quick question. I'm not sure if I heard you wrong, but did you say that there's the only electives in 5th through 8th are music now? So do we no longer offer, or are we no longer offering like the robotics and the like foreign languages and things like that? Or is it that we're offering them, but everybody has to take them? And everybody takes the same
Yes and
ones?
no. So robotics, like the quarter classes, robotics, FCS, high school prep, medical detectives, those things everyone takes.
Okay.
Foreign language you bring up, that is an 8th grade, so that is an elective.
Okay.
But for the most part, everyone either takes an intro to French, an intro to Spanish, Spanish 1 or French 1. The only reason you wouldn't is if we still have some students who, for purposes of reading and still catching up, they would take a reading course. So, yes.
Anything other than the foreign language at the 8th grade level?
No.
Okay.
And I won't. But part of that is just, again, it comes with budget and teachers and just, it would be awesome to be able to have a bunch of electives, but there's a whole bunch of
We understood.
factors. So, yeah.
2 questions that may grow into something bigger, but we'll start with that. We've talked a lot about the gaps and for the pandemic, but then also the gaps between where the previous math curriculum had students at which grade level, and then illustrative assumes that they know more than they do. So can you talk a little bit more about the intervention process and what that looks like in 5th through 8th? Because I know it used to be in elementary there was a whole block set aside for intervention, and that's not the case. But what does the reteaching intervention process look like, and how do we screen for that? How are we figuring out what students need and how to address that?
Okay. So part of that goes back to kind of that page where I showed, and I really am working hard with teachers to see those readiness assessments, because again, it's really, so like on that 5th grade one, you saw it was 4th grade standards, so it was those precursor standards to the major work of 5th grade. And so all that is mapped out in the coherence, so it's really is probably the tightest we've been able to see, like what leads to what. The other thing is we have been working closely, like special ed. I've gotten them now to the table with me a little bit with math. And so we are able to look at those readiness assessments and those major work standards. And then when you think about intervention, it does look a little bit different in each of the buildings. But there is, every building has some set aside time. So it's flex time at the middle school, 7th and 8th grade. They do have 30 minutes each day. And then how it's determined who does what. But there is that time for that intervention. And then at the 5-6 buildings, there also is some set time, but it looks different in how that's approached. So if we, again, we know that we have some students who need some more of that preloading, right? Like how do we get them access back to that 4th grade level standard or that whatever that precursor is. The materials now are built in, like, so I've been working with teachers. One of the things, like, what are those, like, really important pieces? So fractions, like, that's what you're gonna hear probably 5th and 6th grade, probably even a little bit 7th and 8th. Like, that's the one thing that students really need a good understanding of, because all of this leads then to that algebra instruction. We want them all to be able to do whatever they want to be able to do at the high school level. So we've spent a lot of time right now on building teacher capacity of even fractions. And then our last PD, we spent time at 7th and 8th grade. We had special ed in the room, gen ed in the room, and then led by coaches, we worked on hands-on equations. So they took a look at, they had already given those readiness assessments that looked at those standards that went into the equations. We sat down and we did some PD on, okay, now that we know this, where do we enter in and how do we administer then getting kids into groups to do hands-on equations? And so some of it, depending again, if you look at that multi-tiered system of support, do they need tier 2 where they need just a little bit of extra, and then typically it's our classroom teachers that can help provide that support. If it's tier 3, then that's where those level 1 teachers are also now. We're all starting to talk the same when it comes to standards and the coherence map, like that's the same now. That's the same thing that gen ed and special ed are looking at together. So then they can do that in the special education room, which aligns then to what they're doing in core, which then can align to moving them forward. Like it's really in a good place right now, but it's kind of like if you want to sit down sometime, like we can show you all the pieces. Like I am really excited, and then the bridges piece as well. Like that's a really good intervention, and it aligns really, really well to illustrative, which again connects back to the standards, and that's really what we're instructing. So I don't know if that answers what you're.
In the schedule that there's, because most of the time it's like, oh, well, they can stay in for lunch or they can stay after school, or that doesn't.
So 7-8, the flex time, like that is in the schedule every day, minus when they, I think they use 30 minutes of one of those days for OCM. And then at the 5-6 buildings, it's in there as well. Like, so there is that intentional time during the day for intervention.
And then I'm sure part of this will have to wait until Nathan and Bob give us our winter FAST assessment update, but I'm going to ask the question from the curriculum perspective as well. After fall, I was reading on the FAST assessment website, because that system has all this information on it. It's just open. And I was surprised to read that we always talk about benchmarks, and when we're looking at standard-based grading and are our students meeting the proficiency scales that we've set, benchmark is 40% proficiency, which sounds crazy to me, that we're great, is like if they hit benchmark, they're 40% proficient and we're good. But what we never talk about is it goes on that website from FAST Assessment to say that if a student has to be at 70% proficiency to be on track for career and college readiness. But we only ever talk about if students are hitting the 40% benchmark. So what do we do for the kids that are hitting benchmark but aren't yet career or college ready? What are we doing for that middle? Or do we do anything? Do we just focus on benchmark?
So I'll try my best to answer this, and if we need to talk about it more, we can. So part of it is FAST is really meant to be a screener, and the screener is really meant to catch those kids who are at risk of not being proficient. So it's really that piece to catch kids. And so, and that's kind of the downfall of, there's different assessments for different purposes and what you need. And so for this purpose, it's really like, how do we catch those kids before they fall and then get the intervention? And the other piece is, it's really meant to be like a word recognition screener. And so we need to know, are kids able to read the words on the page, and are they able to access that? And if not, we need to give them that support, because without being able to lift words off the page and be able to read them, they can't move on to all those other pieces that are going to make them college and career ready. And so the FAST test, if, I don't know how to.
No, it's just one piece.
Yes, and we're not, and it doesn't sound like we're doing other things and looking at other measures for those kids that aren't at risk. Does that make,
Okay.
The purpose is really, how do we catch and find those kids who potentially are at risk of not being able to move forward in reading? And that's kind of that sole purpose of that. If we wanted to look at, okay, how are we then monitoring kids who are at benchmark? So then that's where, again, our ISES data is going to help us to see, are the kids doing that growth? What kids are doing within the classroom, and those unit assessments are going to help to see those pieces as well. The FAST screener is just not really set up to look at those growth measures in that way.
My last question. You've really talked about how, curriculum is very aligned with standards, and this is what we're doing to meet this standard and this standard and this standard. It's all in the curriculum. How do the extra things fit into that plan? Like when teachers use the math apps, like extra math, the timed math assessments, or when, I don't know, they add National Treasure to a social studies classroom or whatever. How does that all fit into the curriculum structure? Or the teachers pay teachers resources, things like that. How does that all fit into our curriculum plan?
So part of that is, my job is to help give teachers the very best resources I can to support what it is that they're supposed to do, right? And that's that guaranteed viable curriculum. So that goes back to the standards, it goes back to the pacing. The other side of that then is teachers are professionals as well. And so they have that somewhat that autonomy too, to use their best professional judgment. And as long as they're aligning to standards, they're following the pacing and the curriculum that the standards, which is that curriculum, they have some of that teacher choice in how they do that.
I want to make it clear, I'm not against the teacher choice or the autonomy. I'm just curious how it all, it's a puzzle, how it all fits together. I'm not against the other stuff.
Sometimes, and we talk about that. So when I have curriculum facilitators in, especially when we think about social studies, and those are teacher-created units, and we've used lots of resources and pieces, sometimes, depending on the students in the classroom or depending on teacher knowledge, or there's pieces where they're they may find time to interject something else or to add something, and then we do try to talk about that, and if it's good for all, then those are pieces we want to add to those units.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good questions, Erica. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, 502, Linn-Mar High School School Counselors Advisory Report. Katie, are you going to comment?
I am going to comment real quick. I was impressed. The attitude was professional, compassionate, and very collaborative. And it was fun to be a part of that and I was surrounded by all of the team. The caseload right now for counselors is approximately 350 to 400 students per counselor. And every student has an opportunity to meet with their assigned counselor to go over their school plan. whether or not that student, sometimes they have to track them down a little bit to get to have that conversation, but many students come in very voluntarily because they want to make sure that they're on track, especially for graduation. They then had some other topics about student attendance and some concerns regarding patterns of ongoing absence. And then also job, tech, college, and career fairs. So it was a very excellent meeting, and I was really impressed with their professionalism amongst each other.
Thank you. Board visit, I want to compliment all 7 of us were able to attend, so that was wonderful. So to be sensitive to time just a little bit due to the weather, does somebody have a high-level thought on what the visit was and how it went?
I thought that the visit was a really great showcase of student and faculty staff interaction. Part of our visit just was the welcome part of the day, and getting to see all of the teachers and all of the support staff, like basically every member of the staff was in the hallway greeting, like not just saying hi, but I saw routine handshakes, like dance routine handshakes that you could tell they do that with with specific students every day, and there was just a lot of personalization to how they start their day. So I thought that was great.
It was a very good session. The
Yes.
excitement in the building was huge, so thank you. Katie, diversity?
Well, great. I started the meeting, they had a great roundtable of introductions, and so there are very many voices present. They also had many items still in the works that are still in the discussion form. They're not ready to bring those forward for any type of action, but just are still in the conversation. The group has a culture of very healthy and very honest conversations and seeing each other from different perspectives. And so I look forward to staying on this team, so I'm thankful for that.
Thank you. 505 Policy Committee report. We had a lot of stuff to go through. Anybody have some comments? Or
Was
For a high level.
go ahead.
I can share high level, just that we are going through the entire 600 and 700 series, so we've got about 100 and some pages of policy that we're working to review, and those are now out to, we're making a change in process, so those have been submitted out to the board members to have an opportunity to review those with a little bit more time now before the next board meeting, so those will be ready to come forward to for first reading at the next board meeting.
All good? Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I just say that I really appreciate that change? That was good.
Rachel, you attended a few city council meetings?
Yes, I reviewed those agendas, and the only thing that really pertained to us, they weren't super heavy meetings. The only thing that really pertained to us was that there were a couple of petitions from the public. One was to put a stop sign at the intersection of 31st and 29th, and another one to put a stop light at 31st and 29th. And the Traffic Advisory Committee recommended against those, and those recommendations were accepted by the City Council. So no changes there, just something to think about as we talk about, you know, kids making it across 29th, and our current situation I think is okay because we're busing them to the hubs, but something to keep in mind. That's all I got.
Thank you, Rachel. Finance and audit, we had a fairly intense finance and audit meeting. Just
One of the longer
stuff.
meetings we've had in a while.
A lot of stuff to, anybody have a summary? You have a thought?
Well, I think the most important thing to bring up, because we've talked about the performance venue before, we've already passed the revenue bonds and things like that. We looked at more budget projections for the next 3 years in looking at various scenarios, and last year we started the first year of 2 years of proposed budget cuts, so this would be year 2. So we've talked a lot about what does year 2 look like, what does that number need to be in order to get our solvency and our UAB ratios back to where, we like to see them. So, I'd like to commend John on spending a lot of time in those projections and really looking at all the numbers and, factoring in enrollment and what SSA, and it's all conjecture because we don't know what the legislation is going to look like for SSA. We don't know what enrollment's going to look like 3 years from now. So it's kind of a guessing game, and, we want to be conservative, but we also want to, be able to do the things that keep the district moving forward. So we looked at budget projections with a committee recommendation of striving for between $2 and $2.5 million in cuts for year 2, and that the goal being that we want to finish the budget cuts this year and not have to come back for a 3rd year. So we want to do what is necessary this year. We said 2 years of budget cuts. We don't want to come back next year and say, oh, by the way, we miscalculated. We want to take care of it this year. And the nice thing, not that budget cuts are nice, but with the board's previous approval at our last meeting for the early separation, that takes care of almost half of the budget cuts, which is a great position to be in because that's voluntary. So that's our consensus recommendation from the committee for the board to consider. We're not asking for a vote. We're asking for the board's thoughts on that number. And then if everyone seems to be okay with that, that will give Amy and John the ability to actually start looking at what might need cut and see if we actually need to get to what we would need to do to get to those numbers. So for me, that's kind of the biggest thing that came out. We also talked about some other things, but I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and just, Britt, I appreciate the comments because we really feel with all the groundwork that was laid this past year with the budget cuts for year 1 and year 2 that we feel we're right in line. We really don't feel it's going to be pressured, it's going to be pushed. So we really sincerely feel pretty good about it, even with a few of the factors coming in, a little bit lower enrollment this year, et cetera. So as we roll into that, I'm assuming Amy will probably comment in your report as well on that. So.
I talked about certified enrollment during my superintendent's update.
I know we did in the committee, we talked about needing board consensus, not a vote, just are we okay with that range so that John and Amy can move forward with more specific planning to bring back to us later for a vote. If you guys have questions.
Yeah, once again, it's not a vote, but if you have thoughts moving forward, let us know. And then we'll move forward with that as well. So.
I think without seeing all of the information that the committee was reviewing, I think we need to put our trust in the committee to have reviewed that information and the trust in the staff to make the best, to put the best recommendation forward of what numbers we need to really be looking at. And then when we have all of that together, to be able to really see for sure. Again, it's not a vote, but that's why we have a finance committee, and that's why we have a CFO, and why we have a superintendent to be able to look at those in more depth. So I support the recommendation of the committee.
I appreciate, Britt, what you mentioned there, and trying to get this done in 2 years. I think that is a wise move, and I know the numbers are slightly different than maybe we were originally projecting, but I think that is, looking at that, I appreciate the committee for looking at that and bringing it forward this way. So the work you guys did looking at that.
A lot of work to do for Jonathan.
This is just kind of like that goal in the air, and now you got to figure out what makes it.
Pray for a 5% allowable growth.
But yes, the the 2 to 2.5 million gets our solvency ratio where we want it to be. It gets our UAB ratio where we want it to be, and it gets us to the end of the 3 years of the initial introduction of the ESA program. And by then, we'll have a better idea of how many families each year are going to join that program. So I think that looking at that's the percentage we need to get to is a good target.
And for the rest of the group here, so of the variables that we have to look at, SSA funding, enrollment, you know, the 2.5 million, we took a very conservative approach to SSA funding and a very conservative approach to enrollment, you know, kind of the worst case, so that we wouldn't have to dig deeper unless something drastic and catastrophic happens. So that's where we're all feeling that the 2 to 2.5, whether or not that's all one cut or a series of triggers that we can pull. So that's kind of where we're sitting is we looked at it, looked at the forecasts, took very conservative approaches, so we're all feeling good about it.
Okay, all good comments. Thank you very much. Superintendent update.
Thank you, President Buckholz. So as Barry was alluding to, I do want to share with you where we ended this past year for certified enrollment. Our certified enrollment as of October 1st was 7,566.62 students, making us down 118.9 students from last year's count. Our number of served students is 7,302.52, which is down 146 from the previous year. Also, I think of note is our open enrolled in and out numbers. We currently have 887.5 students open enrolled out and 623.4 students enrolled into the district. New this year was the educational savings accounts. The state funded 231 of those. 54 of those students were with us last year, and 69 of those students were kindergartners. And just as a reminder, ESAs were funded for all kindergartners in the state that applied and met the qualifications, all students enrolled in a public school, and students enrolled in an accredited non-public school with a household income at or below 300% of the federal poverty guidelines. So the certified enrollment, I think, coupled with the cut that former Superintendent Biscard as well as CFO, COO Dave Nicholson, being down 118 students, they last year were predicting that maybe this year we'd be cutting more around 1 million, 1.2, 1.5, and I think you see that. You've got historic, with the certified enrollment being down 118, we've got historic, underfunding of SSA over the last 10 to 12 years, less than 3%. Last year we got 3%. And then we have this ESSER funding cliff. So I think you have this kind of trifecta of events that are happening, and then you hear that need or recommendation for 2 to 2.5 million. So we will get to work for sure after this meeting, and you'll be hearing more from us in the upcoming weeks and over the next couple of months as we continue to refine and make those decisions. Just want to put a plug in, segueing to now, totally different topic, the main event. The tickets have gone on sale. That is going to be held on Friday, April 5th on our website. You can see some fun pictures of the artwork that the kids have developed in the back there. We are proud to share that in December we had a legislator offering, and we offered all 9 of our state legislators an opportunity to visit the district for an informal gathering and discussion, and then toured the high school and Indian Creek Elementary schools. I want to thank Elizabeth Wilson, Art Stade, Eric Jurdy that attended that, and then later in the month, Sammy Sheets and Molly Donahue were able to connect with me and set up a one-to-one meeting. So I really appreciate having an opportunity to talk to all of them ahead of the legislative session, and with all 5, we did share the board's priorities, so that was wonderful. Building visits, I had a goal in the months of November and December to get to all 12 attendance centers, and I was able to do that with 11. I didn't quite hit my goal, but I'm excited that I got into all buildings. We had a one-on-one conversation with all of our principals, and then an opportunity to tour as well. We've been doing some work lately with a group called the Donovan Group to help us with some communication aspects in the district, and we've been super pleased with what we've seen from that group, and I just want to thank Jerry Gallagher. We spent an hour on a call today with him as we're outlining what we hope to be moving towards a PEPAL vote for March 5th. If the board should call for that resolution tonight. So we're doing some pre-planning in the event that that happens, and just have been thoroughly impressed with him. And then as far as our facilities updates, we don't have a lot of new information as far as the stadium parking lot expansion or the tennis courts. And the LRC repurposing, we're having some conversation. Actually, there's a contract before you tonight to have OPN do some further work on the repurposing of this building. Performance arts venue is also tonight, was up for public hearing. You'll vote on that here in a little while. We have the design team met with the city back in December to discuss potential changes. None were identified, but any that could come up, they were going to try to rectify before the bid issuance. And then the design team has been meeting with the Linn-Mar Facilities Group to review the phasing plan and construction documents for that. And then as far as the new administration building, I think one of the more exciting pieces for that is that John and I have been working with OPN on the furnishings for the new building. And we were able to, after a few meetings now, start to have that conversation with Cabinet, and we'll expand that out to other LRC folks as well. And of course, tomorrow is going to be a no school day. We will see what happens with Wednesday. I was on a National Weather Service call earlier today calling for 11 to 16 inches of snow and saying that this is potentially the worst storm that we've had in 13 years. So everybody, stay safe out there.
When I got here, it was still 9 to 13, so now you're saying 11 to 16?
That was National Weather Service at 2:45 on a
Good
webinar.
news, thank you.
My son is going to be doing backflips in the snow tomorrow. He's so
Appreciate
excited.
it. Thank you, Amy. I just want to make a quick comment, too, that all of the committees that have met have just been amazed the hours that were put in the last month here. And I really compliment a lot of you with Christmas coming up and with all of that, to be able to fit all that in. You were here that one day, almost 6 hours. So anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you. So we go to unfinished business. Approval of plans and specifications, please.
Motion to approve the plans and specifications for the Linn-Mar High School Indian Creek Elementary Roof Replacement Project.
Second.
Motion by Britt, second by Melissa. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I'm sorry, opposed, no. Sorry about that. Okay, 602, approval of plans and specifications, 602.1.
Motion to approve plans and specifications for the new Linn-Mar Performance Arts Center.
Second.
Motion by Justin, second by Britt. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to approve the 2024-2025 at-risk dropout prevention modified supplemental amount application in the amount of $1,444,275, and for this amount to be submitted to the School Budget Review Committee for consideration of increased spending authority.
Second.
Motion by Melissa, seconded by Rachel. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Make a motion to approve the resolution ordering election on the question of continuing to levy a voter-approved physical plant and equipment property tax on Tuesday, March 5th, 2024.
Second.
Motion by Rachel, second by Britt. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Director Foss,
Yes.
Director Lau-Lancaster,
Yes.
Director Maury,
Yes.
Director Rollinger,
Yes.
Director Walker,
Yes.
Director Wall,
Yes.
President Buckles.
Yes. Motion carries. Early graduation requests.
Barry, can I just say one more thing about that? I just
Yep.
want to remind everyone that as more conversation happens, as officials of the district, we cannot tell anyone to vote yes or no. We can only provide information. And I know it's really easy to be in a conversation and say, oh, it's really important to vote yes or no. We cannot, it's against the law. It's just a reminder.
A reminder.
Thank you. Okay, early graduation.
Motion to approve the early graduation request as presented.
Second.
Motion by Melissa, second by Justin. Questions?
I'd like to congratulate everyone.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Open enrollment requests.
Motion to approve the open enrollment request as presented.
Second.
Motion by Rachel, second by Britt. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda, please.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Motion by Britt, second by Katie. Questions?
I really appreciate the consent agenda. Is there any way we could get, and maybe I'll just learn this, but a key for all the schools in here?
I said the same thing,
You know,
by the way.
I will learn this, and then I think about it as somebody who's coming to the meeting for the first time, that it'd be hard for
Little
them.
glossary.
So,
It's not just the schools. May I insert, like, I was really good with the elementaries, so forth and so on, but what's NS? Oh, nutritional services, there's other. So I had the same question.
Okay.
Get you a legend.
We have a motion by Britt and seconded by Katie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, let's get to the calendar. We have a board visit. Let's just look at the times, of course. 11:30, which is this week. We're assuming the weather will let up for us. Lion Learning, is that something we sign up for? Normally, we only have 2 or 3 of us there.
What's the topic?
Pepple.
Awesome. I will be happy to come if you want me to.
Okay. Britt's City Council.
Do we need to have more than one person at the Lion?
You can have up to 3.
Do we, yeah.
Yeah,
Probably should look at the calendar
no
before I
more than
volunteer.
3. Let's make sure we know that, so.
No, I'm just thinking we should
We wanna
probably
sign up?
identify who else is going to come.
Britt says yes.
Yeah, I can do it.
17th.
That's on January 17th.
Wednesday.
correct.
Next
Will it be
Wednesday?
recorded?
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, I'd be happy to attend too, but if anybody else wants to, they can.
yeah, I happen to have it on
You
my
can.
calendar. So.
I cannot
Okay.
comment.
So me and Justin, and Rachel, you want to be there?
I can if you want me to.
Barry, Britt, and Justin. City Council, taken care of. Board visit, once again, that's a little bit different time, noon. Finance audit, we've got everything covered, I think. Marion City Council, February 8th. I'll do it. Let's jump to the 22nd. Anybody?
I can do that one.
Looking.
Melissa? Okay. And then just real quick, we have our a legislative session set up by AEA and SAI, ISB on the 12th, February 12th and 13th. Anybody able to attend that, or?
I got the flyer, and at first I thought it was a 2-day event, and I was but since it's an evening into the next day, I think I can go. So, yeah.
When and
When is
where is
that?
that?
You would have, did you get a flyer on this?
Yeah.
For IASB.
Yep.
It's also
Usually it's just a day,
It's a
but
day,
this year,
Is it it's in Des Moines though, right?
Yes.
the 13th is a day on the Hill.
When I got that, I wasn't sure if that was reserved just for our legislative liaisons, if
no,
that's the right word.
Anybody can.
anyone on the
yeah,
board
there-
can go. It's not a quorum situation, so
I'm going to try to go too.
yeah,
So Britt will be there. Anybody else?
the evening,
is
the
it?
night before is a learning session. So ISB and SAI will present on all of the topics and what, give you talking points if you have questions on things like that. And then the second part is actually going and talking to the representatives on, they've never done it as a 2-day thing, so.
So what day is it again? Sorry.
February 13th. It starts the evening of February 12th and goes all day February 13th. I have a work conflict, I cannot go.
Okay.
Also in my weekly update, so if you could email Gayla, if you're interested, we can get it set up for all of you that are wanting to go.
Thank you. And I mean, this is fluid. I mean, if anybody thinks about it later or they sign up and can't go, don't feel like you're locked to it either, so. Okay. For the good of the board, is anything
One other
else?
just quick thing, because this wasn't a formal committee meeting, but Venture Academics had a really fun panel for learning about civic duty. And so Britt and I had the opportunity, just a huge shout out to that group for all the great work that they're doing in their civics class. It was just really fun to engage with the students and a couple of the city council members, and all the work that they had done prepping and learning about opportunities to serve the community and the governmental processes. So just
We
wanted to
had
share that
really,
we had that up.
it was a panel. There were 2 city council members and then Melissa and I, and the students did a great job. It was their event. The teacher made that very clear. Students came up with really great questions and definitely highlighted the differences between serving on city council versus school board. Yeah, that's a great strand, and they're really engaged students, and I think it's exciting to see what they might do in the next few years themselves.
So just a thank you to them for inviting us. Had a great time.
And then I just want to share, I want to congratulate all of our show choirs participated in their first competition this weekend, and all of them, they swept all of the awards. They took first place in everything, so good job to all 3 groups.
Yeah, it was a busy weekend. There was wrestling and
Yeah, there were a whole lot of other things that I know we were successful at. That's just the only one I know about. So, yeah, we all tune into different things from time to time. So.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn at 6:10.
Rachel and Britt. Rachel.
Third.
Rachel made the motion. Britt seconded at, whoops,
6:10.
6:10. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. What about